Afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Alex Dennis, Senior Advisor at Hull Strategies, a Nashville based public affairs firm. And it is my pleasure to be moderating this panel discussion regarding the Boring Company's Music City Loop system. I'm joined by the president of the Boring Company, Steve Davis. Also joining us is Charles Robert Bone, who serves as managing director of real estate investment for the development firm Southwest Value Partners, which has been instrumental in Nashville's growth. You've seen it in Nashville Yards. We also have Dee Patel. Dee is the first female managing director of the historic Hermitage Hotel and serves as the chair of the Greater Nashville Hospitality Association. Thank you all for being here. And of course, for those of you joining us online, this is an opportunity for you to learn more about Music City Loop, and we will be answering your questions throughout the call. And to the panelists, please jump in at any point if there's something that you'd like to add to the conversation. But let's kick it off. Steve, in reading comments online, I have noticed there is some confusion about what the system is and how it operates as a whole. Can you provide a high-level explanation so we can better understand Loop as it pertains to not only the system, but here for Music City Loop?
Yeah, of course. And am I audible? Can you hear me, Alex?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. And thanks to everyone for signing in. This is the first time we've done an X Space as Born Company, and if we get positive feedback and it was deemed useful, we'll start doing them much more regularly to really get the information out there. There's probably actually people that don't know what Loop is, and I don't know how many people have ridden it. In Vegas, we've put about 3.5 million people through Vegas Loop, but obviously that's 1% of American population. So there's many people who have not ridden it. Loop is a pretty amazing public transportation architecture. I mean, it's basically cars and tunnels, which doesn't sound mind-blowing, but it actually is when you experience it. And we certainly invite people to come. You reach out to us, we can get you tours, but you can just ride it. It's open every day. The way it works is you come out of whatever your destination, whatever place you are at. In Vegas is mostly hotels, and there's kind of a system requirement where when you come out of the door, you're within 100 feet of a car. So there's no getting to a station and then you have to walk a quarter mile. It's 100 feet, and usually it's actually less than that, but that's the goal. And then the car is waiting for you. The median wait time, median, not mean, median wait time is 0 seconds in Vegas Loop. The mean is about 20 seconds. And the car is waiting for you. And then you go into the tunnels. And it's an express system. This is like a very, very important fundamental part of Loop. It's why we use cars, because the chance that everyone, except for like major events, like stadium events, the chance that 40 or 50 people are going to the exact same place at the exact same time is low. So it has to be point to point, and it has to be small vehicles. So when you get into the car, you go directly to your final destination without stopping at any intermediate stops. This is like critically important. It means you can add an unlimited number of stations along the way, and you're not affecting transit time. So we always use the Las Vegas Strip as our example because that's where we're building right now. There's about 50 stops from the airport all the way to the north portion of Vegas. If you had to stop at every one, that would be a 2-hour trip. But there's nowhere in Vegas on that realm that's less than 5 minutes, and in general in all of Vegas, nowhere that's less than 9 minutes. Point to point in a car, very little, almost no wait time, and then very little walk on either ends. So it's a pretty wonderful architecture. It's also the safest public transportation system ever built. Elon and just general like common sense have been pretty clear. This must be not as safe as every other transpo system, but safer by orders of magnitude. And I mean, Alex, we can go into it yesterday. I could talk for a long time about this and don't want to monopolize for the next 15 minutes talking about loop safety, but we happily should at some point because it is by far the safest public transport system out there. And it's actually pretty amazing if you can hear what we do. And then finally, Music City Loop would be our second kind of major project. Vegas Loop is actually the largest tunneling project in the country, and the largest transportation. We have 68 miles entitled. We've put more than 10 in the ground already, which is 5 times actually more than the rest of the country combined for subsurface transportation tunnel. We still have a long way to go. And that's Vegas Loop, and then Music City Loop, which is currently approximately 18 miles, is actually the second largest subsurface transpo infrastructure project in the country. So it's super ambitious. It's very exciting, and we're like ecstatic to build it. We'll probably get into this later in the talk, but I just want to make sure that the most important thing at the beginning for the community to understand is what Loop is, why it is good, and then that it is amazingly safe. Those are the 3 points that I probably keep making tonight. But with that, I'll go back to you.
Well, that's wonderful. We've got a list of questions that's really going to dig into the intricacies. So be standing by. We have all those questions for you. But in the interim, Charles, Robert, and Dee, thank you for joining us. I'm just interested, as business leaders here in the community, what are your thoughts about the system coming to Nashville? Charles, Robert, let's start with you.
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can.
I can. Great. Glad to know this works. Feels like this might be the answer to a future trivia question with Steve saying this is the first X Space they've done. So glad it works. From my perspective, look, I think it's incredibly exciting. I mean, the more we learned, I think the more impressed we are by just the technology and the innovation. And we've known, going back, 15 years now in Nashville at least, if not longer, that kind of the ability to efficiently move around the city has been the top of Nashvillians' minds. I mean, having been born and raised here, it has always been an issue, but it increases kind of year by year. And so I think there's a misperception that this tunnel on the Music City Loop is going to be exclusive to just visitors to the city and to just tourists, which is not the case. But even if that were the case, in and of itself, that is a fairly compelling proposition. And I think the other thing I think about is, the issues that we face in Nashville, from, affordability to public education to safety, transit, infrastructure, congestion, right? These are all issues that growing and thriving cities like Nashville are facing. These are not issues that are unique to Nashville, but I have felt for a long time, just given the breadth of the creativity in Nashville and the experiences that we have here and the talent that we have in the city, that the solutions can be different. We don't have to have the same solution as every other cities that have tried this. And so while the issues around transit and congestion and traffic are similar to others, I think the solutions can be different. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so excited about this, is because I do think this is one of those solutions that can be a real competitive advantage for the city.
And Dee, what are your thoughts on the system?
Well, I think Charles really said it really well. Representing the Greater Nashville Hospitality Association as the chair, a longtime Nashvilleian and a leader in hospitality, an industry that supports over 70,000 jobs just in the Davidson County area. This is really exciting for us because we have long supported great transportation. And I don't believe that this is competing with any mode of transit. I think it gives us the opportunity to truly individualize, choose how we move. I think it can complement what we have existing in our ecosystem of opportunities. I think it does allow pressure of the transportation system to be lifted off the roads. I think first impression when guests are visiting the city is everything, and I think that from a workforce mobility standpoint, how our staff are able to move in and out, it does lessen when we have more transportation options. And we know that that this project does reflect two longstanding priorities in our industry that we really need. And transportation really is one of the most urgent challenges that we face. And so I think I'm really encouraged, and our industry is really encouraged to continue to learn and understand how this can really be a true asset in our community.
Steve, I have a multifaceted question here for you. The Boring Company has explored multiple cities for their next project. What made Nashville stand out to you? And did the company receive any incentives for selecting Tennessee? And my last part of that question would be, have you and do you plan to engage residents and local elected leaders in the area about Music City Loop?
Sure. So we'll start with the incentives. The answer is no. We didn't seek them. It's fully privately funded. It was pretty important for us that there was no public funds used. Same as Vegas Loop, by the way, and that there couldn't be something where it was viewed as us getting some sort of favor. So there's nothing like that. Um, going back to Vegas Loop, it is the largest infrastructure project in the country, and so we weren't. It's not like we had this voracious BD team out there trying to get lots of other projects. We had a team of one, actually. And what I had said to him was, if you find a city that is incredibly welcoming, the project is buildable, and it is useful, we will build it. And that's not like a new thing. We've had that for multiple years, having that offer, and and Nashville started coming up in 2024, and nothing went wrong. Everyone was just incredibly kind. It is buildable. We can talk about how much geological diligence we've done if that's interesting, and it's incredibly useful in that it'll take anywhere on the system to the airport will be 9 minutes. Not just a single stop, just anywhere along the alignment, which obviously not obviously, but we're starting at Lot 16 by the state capitol, and then headed all the airport. So anyone along that alignment is less than 9 minutes to the airport. And I personally have driven in that airport traffic. It is there's a lot of traffic. That's the problem we're trying to solve. To the points of the other speakers, this is an option. Nobody's forced to ride it. We're taking all the financial risk. And our goal is to provide a public transportation system that is so good that people will want to ride it, which is exactly the situation we have in Vegas right now. Um, right now, Nashville Airport, which is, I mean, it's such a growing, wonderful city. Nashville Airport, I think used to do, and apologize if the numbers aren't perfect, but it used to do around 70,000 passengers per day. I believe is now breaking 100,000 passengers per day. Like the growth is very obvious. Planning a new terminal. Music City Loop could handle all of those people without issue. The small part of the Vegas system that's operational right now, we've built over 10. There's 4 miles operational. It can do about 7,000 people an hour. Once fully built out, it's 90,000 people an hour. But when Music City Loop first opens, it should be around between 20 and 30,000 people per hour, which could take 100% of the airport traffic, or it could take a small percentage, just based on what people like. Um, and then I think that answered the second question. I think the third one was public engagement. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, and any of the elected leaders.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's incredibly important to be max transparency. That's why this is the first X space we've done, was to try and really be as transparent as possible. Um, we put out a blog post every 2 months on our website. We've done more than 50 community events, volunteer and speaking. We're engaged with 94 community organizations, and have over 131 engagements planned in the next 6 months. So it's almost one a day. I asked the team to add up the total number of people who have been at the speeches, which is tough to do, but it's estimated between 10 and 15,000. And even though that's still a small number. So the goal is just to continue to doing these events, and just anything to get the information out. One, to be transparent, but to be frank, also to get useful feedback, because the whole goal is to build the most useful thing. And I can't even tell you how many times a person has said, you should put a station here, or you should consider this. And we immediately attempt to do that. With regards to all of the political personnel and public regulators, enormous amounts of conversations. We do weekly meetings with state commissioners. We're in touch with all 10, or at least 10 metro departments, in-person meetings. We've met with, I believe, and apologies if this number's off by one or two, but I think 23 to 24 of the 40 council members. We'd like to meet with all 40, but there's 23 to 24 meetings, multiple state senator meetings, state building commissions, and multiple tours. There's a team in Nashville that pretty much what they do is they meet with the public, and they meet with the regulators and the politicians, and all of the stakeholders. It's actually the most public engagement that we've ever done, and the goal is just to make sure everyone has full information and that we can be alerted of any issues. And while we've certainly seen, some of the articles have been written, but what I will say is, in my personal experience and the personal experience of our stakeholder engagement team, it has been universally positive. Universally positive. We wouldn't go into a city and like fight to build something that's so expensive and labor intensive, and it's just an incredibly difficult project. Um, it- we're still going because everyone has been unbelievably positive, and I believe that's the way it'll continue to go. So we're thrilled to do this. If there's someone we have missed, and obviously there are more than zero, please reach out, Nashville at Boring Company, and we'll keep this going. But the goal is that there's not an unanswered question, and there's a goal that there's not a person that we've missed. And if we have, we apologize, and we'll keep going. But like I said, we're averaging about one every 1 to 1.5 days, literal events. So I'm actually pretty impressed with how the Boring Company team has done.
You bring up something that I've wondered. What is the market value to build Music City Loop? I mean, there's no taxpayer dollars being spent here because it's privately funded. But are you able to share what the market value is here?
It's hard to say the exact value, but I can throw out some figures of merit, and you can do with that what you wish. Building infrastructure in America is unbelievably expensive, and we could talk for a long time about why. I mean, it all comes down to incentive structure. But if you look at various systems around America, to build a mile of subway tunnel will cost you between 900 million and 5 billion, order of magnitude. Like highest in the world, by the way. Europe is expensive, but about half that. China is expensive, but maybe a tenth of that. We're able to build loop tunnels for order of magnitude 10 million a mile. So just doing the math, that's for the tunnel. Obviously, there's more parts of the system. There's emergency exits, there's stations, there's merge shafts. There's a bunch of Lego blocks that are composed of loop, which again is why I highly recommend riding the system in Vegas, because you can see all these pieces come together. But if you just use the 10 million a mile, and multiply by the initial 18 miles, there's the tunneling cost. So it's expensive,
Yeah.
objectively expensive, but compared to if it was a billion a mile and it'd be an $18 billion project, we couldn't do it. The two things that I think Boring Company has that are advantages, and just is we have an architecture of a public transportation system that is wonderful, that people that ride it like it. People ride it just for fun, which is I'm not aware of that happening um, in a lot of systems. And the second thing is the only reason we can do this is we've innovated for years on the tunnel boring technology in order to make it inexpensive to tunnel. And that's been the big one. That's what's taken us the longest amount of time. We're still not there yet, by the way. I think when I say 10 million a mile, I think when we're all said and done, when I say all said and done, we're probably between 2 and 5 years away from hitting this number. I think we can get down to 3 to 4 million per mile, which is less than it costs to build a highway lane.
Hmm.
You can picture what happens to infrastructure if we hit that. But in the meantime, it's very expensive. We obviously can't, we don't have enough money to build this in 20 cities, but we do have enough to build in three. And so that's about how much it will cost. All in, it probably costs about double that, once you put everything else in. But that's order of magnitude what we're willing to invest in Nashville.
And to that point, in looking at some of the comments, multiple people asked this. So let me just read this one verbatim. How many stops are currently planned along the tunnel? And are there plans for any future tunnel expansions?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the tunnel expansions. So right now, what we've really talked about and publicized is the airport alignment. I think that's the one that has been the main. That was the main announcement, and that just to all of the same information starts at Lot 16 near the state capitol. It goes south under Rosa Parks Boulevard, goes under 8th Avenue, then it shifts to Lafayette, then southeast on Murfreesboro, and then makes that kind of left turn on Donaldson Pike, and then it terminates at the airport. Less than 100 feet from baggage claim, which is great. There's the 100 feet, like awesome experience. And that's been what we're talking about. But what we're also looking to do, and I don't want to call this like a formal announcement because it isn't formal yet. We're still working with a lot of people on it. But we are officially committed as a company, assuming the community wants it, to also add another 2 miles of alignment, which is 4 miles of tunnel because it's twin tunnel, to go down Broadway, which would be amazing. And so this would start as far west as the 440 and then head east on West End Ave, go past Centennial Park, go past Vanderbilt, Midtown, and then merge into Broadway, and then go down to Riverfront Park. And if the stars align, we could go under the river and go to Nissan Stadium. The last part I said isn't a real thing. That's just something we're very interested. Nothing's happened there yet, but we'd certainly love to do it. But the Broadway portion, we've done an enormous amount of work with all the stakeholders, and if the community is welcoming for that as well, we'll add to it. And what that does, to go back to my original point, is anyone along that alignment is again 9 or 10 minutes from the airport. So if you're at Centennial Park, or if you're down, at Riverfront Park, you're 10 minutes to the airport. For number of stations, what we publicly released is around 20. It's my personal opinion that it'll end up being a lot more than that. The reason we did 20 is because it's about right for for all the conversations we had had at that time, right? We've talked to almost every property owner along these alignments. And so we know where we think stations will get built. And by the way, the second they become official, we'll just put it on our website. But what happens is when people start seeing how good it is, they'll just keep getting added, and that's what happened in Vegas as well. And then again want to stress the the great part of the architecture. Unlike many other types of transportation, if you add a station in the middle, you can do it while the system is operating. You don't have to shut it down. And two, it doesn't affect the transit time of the other stations. So if you go from Centennial Park to the airport and it takes 10 minutes, and then you add 5 stations in between there, it is still 10 minutes. So it's a very long-winded way of saying we'll probably open with about 20. I would be surprised if it doesn't double over time. One thing I should add is how inexpensive it is to build a station. I mean, it's pretty it's pretty wild stories actually. You know, when you think of like a subway station, I mean, they usually cost about a quarter billion, sometimes half a billion, just depending. I mean, the construction complexity is incredibly high to do so. A loop station is a glorified parking lot. You just need a place for the car to go. And so, depending on how you build it, there's 3 ways to build it, but the two most common are a surface station, which is you basically build a ramp up and a ramp down from your tunnel, just it's just like a highway, right? Like merge and exit, and you could build them for under $1 million. Sometimes less than half a million. I think the least expensive one we saw was 400,000 for, and what you get for that is point to point transportation between any other station in the entire system. So you can imagine, you can see why this would be quite appealing. Um, the other type of station that, and you can't build this everywhere, but I mean, based on what we've seen in Nashville, I think I'm guessing a third of the stations will be like this. As long as you plan with the property owner in advance, you can actually tunnel within a foot or two of their subsurface garage. And then you actually poke a hole in the garage for the merge and then for the exit. And now your stations are literally the cost of cutting a hole. So you can imagine how inexpensive. And then they already have all the infrastructure; it's in their parking garage. So I think you'll see a lot of those in Nashville. And then the third type of station, which is the most expensive, um, is just a pure subsurface station. And that depend the cost, it depends. But those can be lowest cost for a purely subsurface station is probably about 5 million. There's a lot of safety systems that go in that, most notably ventilation. And then if you make it grandiose, maybe it goes up to 15. But those will be the minority of stations. I think most of them will be surface stations because that's a very reasonable way to do it. And then occasionally you do based on if they already have a B1 level, you can merge into those.
You know, what you're describing sounds to me almost as if I'm taking an express train. No, you just
Yeah,
get a
except just
straight
it's
shot.
just very small vehicle
Hmm.
though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
You know, from one stop to the other. Charles Robert, I'm interested to hear your thoughts, someone that is
Someone
deeply
that is
involved in Nashville's growth and investment landscape. You understand developers often walk that line between growth and community balance. What economic opportunities do you see emerging from a project like this? And I know we touched on a little bit earlier, but how do you foresee this potentially integrating with the Choose How You Move initiative?
Sure. So, from the Nashville Yards perspective, right, we're pretty singularly focused on what's good for the Nashville community and what's good for Nashville Yards as residents, tenants, guests, visitors, et cetera. As we set out to develop Nashville Yards, we were really guided by a couple of principles that have evolved over time. The first was how do we eh, have a development that we ensure elevates the quality of life for tenants and those residents and visitors at Nashville Yards, but at the same time, how do we create a development that Nashvillians can be proud of, that Nashvillians want to come and experience and walk in the park or go to a concert or go to a movie or have dinner? The second was, how do we create a best in class example of what can be done with a healthy, responsible, sustainable, and safe mixed use development in the urban core? And the third, all of which I think these align with what the Boring Company is proposing and why it's so important for development like Nashville Yards is, from the outset, we've planned to minimize the impacts of all the activity at Nashville Yards and the surrounding area, which includes, 5,000 parking spaces, 10 points of ingress and egress, the ability to go north, south, east, west, connect with all three interstates, We created, elevated private streets. We have gateless garages. And so you mirror that and incorporate that in with the Music City Loop, and it's really important for us. I mean, we already have residents and tenants asking about this, asking about the accessibility of it. And if you take just our hotels today, we've got the Grand Hyatt and the Union Station Hotel. So between those two hotels, we have a little more than 700 hotel rooms, 70,000 square feet of group meeting space. We are working on a plan that would ultimately be a third hotel that would double that capacity. But even if you just assumed that none of the office tenants were using this to go to the airport or to go Broadway or go to Nissan Stadium, if none of the residents were using that, and if the future hotel capacity didn't come, if you looked at just the current hotels, our best estimate is just those two hotels create about 75,000 round trips to the airport on an annual basis, all of which would be eligible, all of which would be interested in taking this. So if you did nothing more than just take those 75,000 trips off of the interstate, off of the access from here to the airport, we think that in and of itself would be pretty significant. So for a development like ours, this is super important, and something that we have remained very interested in. You also ask about choose how you move, and I want to be clear that I'm speaking only for myself, but I've been an advocate of transit initiatives in Nashville going back 15 years. In fact, when the previous one was unsuccessful in 2017 or 2018, whatever that was, there was a reporter that was doing a deep dive on why it was unsuccessful. And I said to him, I said, look, I was for this one and I'll be for the next one. And he said, well, you don't even know what's in the next one. I said, well, I don't need to know what's in the next one. I'm going to be for transit. I'm going to be for dedicated funding for transit. And if you step back and look at it, I think we always knew that any transit initiative in this city would not be myopic. It would be multimodal, and it would account for various different options. And I think this is a nice complement to that. And in no way am I a transit expert, but I think what we have grappled with in Nashville historically without the dedicated funding until Mayor O'Connell was so successful with passing his referendum, or the city's referendum a year ago, was prior to that, transit and funding for transit was always going to be subordinate to public safety and to public education. And so now you have the ability to mirror the dedicated funding and the city's ability to make some really important strategic initiatives in public transit and ancillary needs to public transit, but also to mirror this with the Music City Loop, and to do so that is at no cost to taxpayers, as Steve just walked you through. Right, the Boring Company is bearing the expense of this, as well as the private developers and those owners of real estate and owners of developments that will tie into this. So, again, while I'm no transit expert, I do think, as somebody who's been kind of deeply involved in these issues over the years and somebody who feels passionate about this, especially ensuring that Nashville gets to and stays on the cutting edge of technology and solutions, I think this can be a very nice complement to that.
Uh, Dee, I would like you to add on to this. Many residents are asking, how will this project benefit everyday Nashvillians, not just tourists? I'm seeing this in the comments. What's your thoughts on this sentiment? And what's your take as well about Music City Loop shaping that experience downtown from arrival at the airport to exploring the area?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think if we can take out the friction off of our roads and have an effortless, sort of easy commute inbound, um, I think that helps all of us. And I think that it's hard to think about this sort of technology if you haven't seen it at 48 other states. I think disruptive technology by nature has lots of questions and around it. I think it often opens up the door for us to be innovative. And, rideshare at one point was disruptive and we weren't really sure how to handle and grapple with that. But today it just simply sort of become part of how we move around. So I think that again, it's a new additive to what we already have. And to Robert's sentiments and thoughts, I agree with him wholeheartedly in historically where we've been with transit, where we are today, and where are we moving forward. And Nashville really, really could be viewed as forward thinking, to be the second city, to be bold enough, to be innovative enough, to be encouraged and excited about this as an added option is really exciting. There's more hotels in the pipeline, which means our workforce is going to continue to grow from 70,000 to probably, I don't know, at least over about 100,000, say a couple of years from now. This city is not slowing down, which means we've got to find transit options that can continue to complement the surge of demand that and supply. Um, I feel like I may have answered all the questions or maybe not, but again, I just say competitive in terms of positioning the city itself. I think it really does put us on a national stage. It shows that we're willing to explore these ideas and solutions, and honestly, it matters when it comes to convention sales and major events. I think it would certainly position our city very competitively amongst many of our peers.
Yes, thank you. Steve, let's really, I was going to say drill down or dig into, but everything I said sounds like a pun, and I guess it is. But let's really dig into some of these questions that we're receiving online. So there's several parcels of land already around town that we've seen equipment move to. Has drilling started? And I'm going to read a handle here for you at Steve Mull News is asking, he happens to live right by ground zero for the drilling. Any noise concerns that nearby residents should be concerned about? Will drilling cause any vibrations, shakes to the surrounding areas? And what about expected traffic delays?
Got it. Lots of questions. So we'll start with noise and vibration. So the answer is generally no. The loudest noise that we've ever really seen in this operation, because remember the machine is usually miles away and underground where the actual drilling is happening. Underground between 20 and 90 feet, depending on where in the alignment. So you certainly won't hear it. The noisiest thing in the operation is typically if you use a generator, but we're not actually using a generator. We have grid power. So it'll be actually probably one of the quietest construction operations you could ever imagine, because all the actual construction is happening underground, far away. For vibration, you can't feel it. Our talking point on that one is there's more vibration from someone walking on the sidewalk next to you than there is from the boring machine. So that's really again, it's actually a wonderful way to build. Originally in Las Vegas, we built under the convention center during CES. I think it was probably 2020. It was 180,000 people there, and nobody knew we were tunneling. For the current status, which I think was the first part of the question, we only have one active site right now, which is at Lot 16 by the state capitol. What we've done there is we've dug a launch shaft, which we can get into later. It's actually, we typically don't build launch shafts anymore because most of our machines have the capability just to launch from the surface. But our rock machine, which is a newer machine, doesn't yet have that capability. The third version will have that capability. So we'll only have to build this one shaft, and we won't build any more shafts, I hope. But so we have one boring machine there. It's already been loaded down into the shaft. It's getting tested and assembled, but we currently don't have a permit to start mining or boring. So what we'll end up doing is hopefully getting ready, continuing to work with the stakeholders. Even if we had the permit, I think we'd probably wait. There's other kind of T's to cross, if that makes sense. So when everything is ready, we're technically ready. We have the proper permits. All the stakeholders are ready. We'll start. I would love to say it'll be December, but I think if I had to predict objectively, it's probably in January, maybe February. But I think January is probably the best guess where we are now. But right now, the main thing is just getting that site set up. And by the way, we'll happily do tours of that site. It's not the most exciting boring company tour because it's just one site, but you can at least see the machine. And so, again, please reach out to Nashville at. But yeah, that machine is there. It's called MB1, so Proof Rock MB1. MB2 will arrive in January and get lined up right next to it. And then when everything's aligned, we'll start tunneling. Um,
That was
yeah, I feel like I might have missed one part of your
No,
question.
actually, I think you're right on it. And I'm going to go to this
Okay.
next one too because it leads into this. At Debbie Thomas is asking about the tunnels running under busy streets. Is there any concern about the tunnels collapsing under the daily bumper to bumper traffic?
So So there's no like that would be a highly improbable thing. So it's but however you have to take it incredibly seriously because obviously that would be catastrophic. So the protections against it I kind of talked about no noise and vibration. There's multiple protections against it. The best protection, to be very frank, is the rock itself. If you're tunneling in Florida or in pure sand, where it's sand from your machine all the way to the surface, and you make a mistake, that's where sinkholes happen. But in Nashville, you're protected.
I may ask one of our other speakers. Did you all lose Steve? Can you still hear him?
I cannot.
I can't either. Okay, I'm going to send a text and see if he can get somewhere else where I think he. Oh, there you are. I hear you now.
Oh, where did you lose me on settlement or on something else?
Sinkholes in
Oh
Florida.
no,
If you make a mistake, there could be a sinkhole, and then you
no,
dropped off.
well that's terrible. No, I was just saying if you're in, I'm back now. You can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. So I was just saying in Florida, when you have it's all sand, that's where the risk of sinkholes is highest. While in Nashville, it's all rock, limestone, and so you're protected mostly by that, especially at our great depths. But what I was saying was that in addition to all of that, which is exactly what we do in Las Vegas as well, and for every tunnel we've ever built, and we've built by the way 19 tunnels. That's completed 19 tunnels. We have a few in progress right now as well is we have settlement sensors on the road. So on the actual surface, you have these little prisms. They're traffic rated prisms. Every 50 to 100 feet, there's three of them, center, left, and right. And 24/7, there's automatic monitoring of those sensors. And you have thresholds. And if you ever cross one of those thresholds, the first threshold where you take a look is a tenth of an inch. If you get to a quarter of an inch, you pretty much stop. If you half an inch, you declare emergency. In the history of our tunneling, we've never even crossed the first threshold. But if we did, we would certainly be paying attention. And so even though we will be buried deep in rock between 20 and 90 feet below everything, you won't be able to hear us, feel us, etc. We'll still have an active, redundant settlement monitoring system, and all of that data, by the way, gets reported into the regulators as well. So they get full settlement reports. And obviously, if we ever see something, we'll let them know, but they get their routine reports as well. It is critical that this is safe and the general public sees that this is safe. And again, the settlement monitoring is a large part of that.
To that point, I know
Oh,
there's.
actually, sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
apologize. I should have mentioned one more thing because it didn't directly answer that question. We will never, for tunneling, shut down a lane of traffic on a road. Zero. So there will never be a time where if you are like driving on any of the streets that are tunneling, that we will close a lane. Which, if you contrast it with other construction methods, is very different. Um, the only time we will ever close a lane is if we're doing a geo boring on the surface, which we do in the middle of the night for a few hours. And by the time we start, those will all be done anyway. So and again, a wonderful means of construction where there's no impact to the surface, which is great.
You mentioned the tunnel boring machine. At Como Code is asking a question about that. Can you discuss in more detail the innovation behind TBMs and how it will cut through the rock? And is there a capacity number that you're targeting that they wanted to know? How many cars will be used in the system, and will it be open 24/7? I know that's several questions, so we can circle back as you answer them as well.
Sure. So I think the first one was about innovation in the boring machine itself.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the that's the fundamental of the company. We could obviously talk for an incredibly long amount of time on that. What I'll say is there's three technologies that we've deemed the most important in tunneling that we've kind of bet the farm on. The first is called porpoising, which is the concept that a machine can pull up. So the way that you normally launch TBMs is actually very similar to what we're doing at Lot 16, where you build a giant pit. You have to drop things in with cranes and belts, and it's logistically very difficult, very expensive. And then a lot of times you fill the pit up at the end, so it's very wasteful. So our current machine that we use in Las Vegas, mainly on soft soil, where we're still developing it for rock, it actually shows up pretty much on a truck on a structure called the Monster, and the Monster tilts, and then the boring machine goes right off the truck and bores right into the ground. And then on the opposite end, when you retrieve, it porpoises like a dolphin out of the ground. And we've now done the retrieval, I think, 9 times and the launch twice. And that is incredibly fast, incredibly inexpensive, and incredibly safe because everything's happening at the surface. That's the first technology. The second main technology is called continuous mining. The concept in most boring machines is that you mine a certain amount, which is normally around 5 feet, and then you stop to either erect the lining of the tunnel or to reposition the machine. So this is one of the things where if you just take a step back and you're not into tunneling, you would say this is insane. Because like imagine if you bought a hand drill and instead of like drilling through a 2x4, you drilled halfway through, stopped for a minute, and then drilled
Hmm.
the rest of the way. Like nobody
Mm-hmm.
would ever buy that product, but almost every boring machine in the world has that. And so we have a continuously mining machine. Now the problem is it doesn't continuously mine reliably enough. And Proofrock 5, which is a completely different conversation, but that's the one we're actually going to be starting in early December mining. We hope to do it reliably, and if you do that, your speed you can really almost 8x your speed, which is the goal there. And then the final one, which is probably the most important one, is called ZPIT, or Zero People in Tunnel, which is there is absolutely no reason for a human being to be in that tunnel when it's getting built. It's wasteful. It's not safe. I mean, sorry, it's like safe construction, but like it's the safest place for a human to be is not in the tunnel. This is like very obvious. And if you look at the history of tunneling, and you look at oil and gas do small diameter tunnels all the time, 3, 4 feet, and there's no people down there because no one can fit. So the engineers properly already designed Z-pit systems. But to be very frank, there was some engineer a long time ago who made the wrong decision when tunnels got big and they put people in. And the
Mm.
second you put people in, it's not like the right path. And also, if you actually look at the front of our boring machine and assumedly everyone else's boring machine, half of the systems up there are safety systems, ventilation systems, emergency systems. The whole thing is one big safety system because you have all the people in there. So one of the safest, most important innovation that the boring company can ever have is going to be to perfect a Z-pit system. Now, we've reduced the number of people that you need in the tunnel. I mean, if you go to a standard tunneling project, you might see 40. We typically, in our newest machines, have 3. So we're down from 40 to 3, but 3 doesn't matter. 0 matters. So we have to get it from 3 to 2 to 1 to 0. And for those that are like TBM people, what we can tell you is we've figured out how to do it fully at the front end. We don't need any people up there at the front of the machine, but we still need a few in the back. And we're really working. We hope Proofrock, it's not going to be 5, but probably Proofrock 6 has a good shot at actually getting to 0. And so the day that Boring Company perfects a Z-pit, continuously mining, porpoising machine, the conversation starts to switch from 20 miles in Music City Loop to hundreds of miles connecting Nashville to Knoxville, Nashville to Chattanooga, Nashville to Memphis, because then we'll have the speeds to do that. So that probably was not the point of that question, but I hope that was helpful. What was the second part?
Asking about the capacity of vehicles. How many do you plan to have in the system, and will it be running 24/7?
As long as the demand is there, it should be 24/7. Vegas Loop just went to 7 days a week. We're going to hopefully be opening to the airport in Vegas in Q1, and then we'll go to almost 24/7 there as well. It'll be based on demand, but the intent is yes, 24/7. We'll get to capacity in a second, but one kind of another nice feature of Loop is what you do during off-peak times. So if you picture what happens in let's say, a bus system and a train system, by the way, these are wonderful modes of transportation. They're just different. When you're at an off-peak time in a bus or a train, what you typically do is you just run less buses or trains. This makes perfect sense. But what that means is if you happen to be at a bus station or a train station at that time, you'll just have a longer wait time. Like it's very, very common. Everyone's experienced this. When we have an off-peak time in Loop, we'll run less cars, but the cars wait at the stations. So the median wait time during off-peak at Loop is 0. And so when you do out the economics of that, it actually is economical for us to generally open all the time, even if not a lot of people are riding. So in general, we'll probably default to 24/7. You need a little downtime for maintenance and cleaning, but you can stagger that. But that will really be the goal. And then for capacity, capacity is obviously driven a lot mostly by how many cars you put in the system. But I'll kind of throw out some numbers. When the convention center loop opened, which was the first zero point 0.8 miles that we did in Vegas, we could do about 4,400 people an hour. We've now expanded the Vegas system. It can now do about 6,500 people an hour. When we open the airport line, hopefully again in Q1, we're going to have a nice little step function jump to be between 17,000 and 20,000 people an hour. And when Vegas Loop is fully built out, it'll be about 90,000 people an hour. For Music City Loop, when it first opens, if we do both Broadway and the airport, we expect to open at around 20,000 people in an hour. That's where it should come in. And again, if you do the math, you can see how you can really handle an enormous amount of people doing that. There's an enormous misconception, enormous, that because cars are smaller than buses, that bus systems definitively have more capacity. Anyone who is very confident of that, I would just ask you to check your assumptions, and do out the math. And you can see how with not stopping, how critical that is. And another one, just on misconceptions, is energy efficiency. Loop is often said that it is not energy efficient because you have all these little cars going around instead of one larger vehicle like a train or a bus. Um, Loop with three people in a car is actually the lowest kilowatt hour per passenger mile of any transportation system in the world. And the main reason is because the mass is low. You don't run empty cars, and you never stop. So you're not taking large pieces of steel and slowing them down and speeding them up. And again, I want to be super clear. Trains and buses are great, and Loop is also great in different ways. But it's important to actually look at the numbers. And like I said, energy efficiency, cost per mile, throughput on multi-station systems, transit time, wait time. You'll all end up winning with Loop.
I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Steve, thank you. Charles, Robert, Dee, I want to thank you for joining us. If you have to jump off, we completely understand. If you're able to hang and chat with us some more, by all means, but we're going to keep piling through all these incredible questions that are rolling in. So, you all, please, jump in whenever you would like. But let's go ahead and talk about environment. Steve, you've got people in here asking about protecting the environment and anticipating Nashville's watershed. How are you going to ensure that we have a safe engineering solution as you start to dig underground?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Charles, Robert, and Dee, feel free to jump in any time. Tunneling is probably the best possible way to build. If you literally go like resource area by resource area, you can see this. And one thing we're doing to show this is in the first week of December, we're going to release an EIA, an environmental impacts analysis. We're actually going to release the analysis, which was done by an independent third party, and then the analysis of the analysis by another third party. I guess we can just keep going down the line there. But it looks at all the standard stuff, geology, endangered species, aquatic resources, cultural, visual impacts. It's all the standard ones. And you'll see that is generally the net effect is a positive impact. Positive impact in transpo and air quality, greenhouse gas reduction, economic growth, et cetera. There's really no better way to actually build here, and you can picture it because when you do surface construction, you're dividing the neighborhood. You make a lot of noise. You have a lot of vibration. It's really it's really just the nature of this. When you're underground, nobody really knows you're there. You're not really impacting anyone. For the watershed itself, I mean, the best thing that a tunneling company can do is avoid water. Like water. One thing that is very unintuitive and is actually shocking is that in Las Vegas, even though it's a desert, the water table is between 8 and 20 feet below the surface. And our tunnels in Vegas are about 30 feet below the surface, which means 100% of the work that we do in Las Vegas is underwater. 100%. And we have to manage that accordingly, and which is mostly an engineering challenge. In Nashville, there will be water. You have karst, obviously, in Nashville, and there's gaps. Whenever there's gaps, there can be water. And the way that you do that is the same way that all construction does it, is you locally seal it, and then you keep going. But the people should be very clear that from a water quality, this will have zero effect, zero impact on anything like water quality. Um, and again, we'll make sure that's super clear when we release all these analyses. But I just want to repeat, from an environmental standpoint, there is no better method of construction that I am aware of than using tunnel boring machines.
At Ryan Takata is asking here, what is the plan for the excavated earth? Will the boring company create various types of building materials for local construction?
Yeah, so one of the interesting thing about that is, well, yeah, the limestone itself is quite valuable, but our business model isn't a mining. We're not a mining company where we mine and sell. So the first thing to understand is the sheer quantity of material. So I mean, every time you go a foot, you're generating about approximately 6 yards of material, which is almost a dump truck, just going a foot. So what we've said to the local community is really anyone who wants it can have it. So we've heard about various projects. Metro's told us about some parks they're building. The state's talked about some projects, but anything that could help the community can have the material. They just have to reach out to us, Nashville at a boring company. But again, our plan is not to to mine and then start selling this material. Our plan is to put it to good use, and actually, it's not part of the business model at all. So right now, our main contacts are Metro and the state. If there's anyone else who's aware of a good use for this material, please let us know and consider it a donation.
At Hope on TV is asking, how will firefighters access the tunnel in the event of a fire?
Sure, and that could be asked about construction or operations. Most people are talking operations, so should I start there?
I think so. I would assume that that is what she's referring to, but let's start there.
Yeah, then then that's probably a good segue into just talking about loop safety, which will include this. And this might be the most important thing we talk about right now. So apologies if it goes a little long. Um, I want to reiterate what I said earlier, which is the absolute top priority is that this is the safest possible public transportation system. And so far in Las Vegas, it's 3.5 million people, no safety or security incidents. So I'm just going to go through a few bullet points on what we've done. First is just from an external standpoint. Department of Homeland Security actually did like a full analysis. We asked them to do this. They didn't. We literally said, please come in and do a full analysis on our safety and security. And they awarded us what's called the Gold Standard Award, which is the highest rating possible. It looks at 17 categories of security, emergency preparedness, et cetera. And we got the highest score in the history of all public transportation systems. So that's just kind of a good initial data point. But what do we actually do? So first, we start with the vehicles. The vehicles are the Tesla vehicles, SS3, X's, and Y's. We do have a few Cybertrucks in there. All of them have received NHTSA's top 5-star ratings of all, and they have the lowest probability of injury of all vehicles tested. You can go at nhitsa.gov and see this. So you start with the absolute safest possible vehicles. Next thing is what happens if they get stuck in the tunnel. And just as a data point, so for 3.5 million passengers put through Las Vegas, we've had one vehicle get stuck, and we were able to get it out in 170 seconds. So that's just one data point. But what happens if you actually do get stuck? In that case, you walk out of the tunnel. And I know that sounds like oversimplified, but it's actually quite compelling. Whenever we kind of say something, just picture what happens in other systems. Loop has 0 internal touch hazards, meaning if you get out of the car for whatever reason, there's nothing you can touch that will hurt you. You have a 10-foot, a 10-foot, the length of the width of the road is around 10 feet. So that's your walking path. You have 10 feet. If you're wandering around and you're touching the wall and you're touching the ceiling and you're touching the floor, there's nothing that can hurt you. In many rail systems, they have a 600 to 1100 volt rail that would hurt you. And then the width of the walking path, if it exists, is maybe 3 or 4 feet. So you have a lot more area to walk out, which is really, really nice. This is like a crucially important thing. The second thing is, to your point about first responders, if there's an incident, people are going to naturally and should and will be guided to walk away from the bad thing. So they'll walk, towards safety. That's the place where the first responders are going to be coming from. So they cross. This is really important. They have 10 feet of which to cross. That's a lot of land. If you only have 3 or 4 feet and you have thousands of people going in one direction and 20 firefighters going in the other, you can picture how that could be an issue. So it's another reason why the 0 touch hazards and wide walk path is extremely, extremely important. Next safety feature is full redundant lighting system. There is not a single place in Loop that is not illuminated, and there's not a single place that we don't have cameras on. So if a person ever walked into Loop, like if we were operating and someone just decided to run into it, whole system shuts down. Lights go red, cars stop, etc. There's no place to hide there, which is it's not a challenge. Please don't go and try and hide there. But I'm just saying we have 100% camera coverage on the system. Next is water. Water is a big deal, more so in Las Vegas. All tunnels that are under the water table leak to some amount, including ours. So if you go through, our 10 miles of tunnel in Vegas, you will likely see a drop of water coming sometime. And we have a team that goes once a month and seals up any small leaks. The nice thing is water isn't a safety hazard. In the worst case, if it was like a big leak, which is pretty rare, they're usually like tiny drips. It's like rain to a Tesla. The windshield wiper would turn on and wipe the drops away. If you have drops of water on high voltage, it's a whole different story. So water intrusion is not actually a safety issue. And another nice thing about water, this is a little sideways to the safety, but it's important, is being weatherproof. Tunnels are as weatherproof as you can get for a public transportation system. Vegas Loop has never closed for weather. There was a flood a few weeks ago. Cars went down the strip on water. There was one about 2 years ago that was crazy, where the cars were literally like the standard flood footage that you would see. Vegas Loop never closed. It was completely unaffected by the flood. I can go into how we do that. We actually have a 5-step water intrusion plan that we use, but that would probably take about 5 minutes to go through, so I'll skip for now. But there's basically 5 layers of safety on water getting into that system. Going back to safety, emergency exits, fire detection systems, fire suppression systems. I know this sounds obvious. If anyone's super curious, you should look at the fire detection systems in some other public transportation systems. A lot of them rely on the eyes of people. We have multiple layers. We have the fire detection system itself, which is autonomous. We have obviously the eyes of the drivers. We have a 24/7 manned operational control center, which can obviously see it. We have automated smoke detection software that look at every one of those cameras. Remember, we have 100% coverage, so you can see 100% of smoke. Um, these are all going at all times. We additionally have a fire-rated first responder emergency comm system. So you can sometimes you can see it in the tunnel, sometimes you can't. But basically, if there's ever a fire, all of the police and fire departments' radios work in our tunnel, as do LTE on all coverage. So actually, your cell phones work in the case of an incident or a fire as well. And these go through usually sometimes monthly or quarterly tests with the local fire and police departments. Let's see. It's a lot of stuff.
No, I think
Oh
that's.
no, no, wait, wait, there's more. I need this to
I
be
was gonna say
be
it's
very
incredibly
clear.
important. Keep going. Go ahead.
No, we meet or exceed NFPA 130 standards. We also have bidirectional, redundant, fire-rated ventilation system. I can't even tell you how many articles I've read about how we don't have a ventilation system, which is mind-blowing. The fans are literally in plain sight. But this is critical. These are bidirectional, so you can go either way. The fire department actually has the ability to change the direction if whatever they deem is the safest for whichever incident. Like I said, it's fire rated, so it can ingest smoke if that's ever the case. And additionally, we drill frequently with fire and police. On average, in Vegas Loop, between internal fire, police, and other first responders, is about a drill a week. I cannot express to the general public, and obviously it's internal to the company and to Nashville, the importance of this being the safest public transportation system on the planet. So I can keep going on this. There's probably enough time. What was oh,
Well, I
and then
actually.
how do firefighters get in? That was the
Yes,
original question, right?
that was.
Yeah. Okay. So they have 2 ways to get in. One is we have access points throughout the tunnel. They're through stations. They're through emergency egresses. They're through cross passages, and we work with the fire department to make sure they're placed in the correct places. Maximum 2,500 feet, but typically less than half of that. There's already the standpipe, which is a wet standpipe, meaning the water's already preloaded in the standpipe that's there. There's a hose valve every approximately 150 feet for them to get in. And then besides the ability just to go through those access points, we actually have vehicles available periodically along along the alignment. We call them buggies, but they're much fancier than that, which are emergency response vehicles outfitted with equipment that also allow the firefighters to enter the tunnels.
We've all seen those news stories about battery fires. Are you concerned about accidents within the tunnel, and how will you extinguish those?
Yeah, exactly from what from before. So if a fire, so we've had no fires in the system.
None,
Um,
none at all. That's.
Zero. And again, if you look at many public transportation systems, there's actually a lot of fires. I think there's 3 a day in New York, but that's also an absolutely enormous system, right? I mean, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles. Um, but it will happen one day, right? Like to say that there will never be a fire in the history of the Boring Company if we do, billions of passengers, that wouldn't be reasonable. So the goal is emergency preparedness and make sure all the general public is safe. So what happens in the case of a fire is all the evacuation procedures, and I kind of talked about earlier what it would be. It's much easier to evacuate small cars than it is larger vehicles, especially with like the safe walk space, etc. Then the ventilation system kicks on automatic, and it blows the smoke on the opposite of the path. And then it's up to the first responders. And there's two really main ways to attack a fire. One is you blow the smoke away from people and you let it burn. The other is to actively put it out with the standpipe. And there's in different scenarios, which I can get into, but like there's a lot of technical detail there. Um, in some cases, one is the correct, and in others, the other is. But again, the main thing is that the general public is evacuated safely, and then all of the emergency responders are prepared. Hence all the drilling.
Hmm. This question interests me. Lamacha 574 is asking, are these going to be autonomous vehicles?
So yeah, it's a great question. So in Vegas, we now do both. So up until a few months ago, it was purely driver, and then a few weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, we started doing limited full self drive in the tunnel. It's the easiest full self drive problem, obviously, in history. There's no weather, there's no pedestrians. It's the same thing every time. So this isn't a technical problem. It's a combination of permitting and what people want. So what we found is that people want both. There's some routes where full self drive makes perfect sense. There's others where people like having drivers, um, especially for information, because drivers are an amazing group of people who answer a lot of questions about the system. So what my prediction is, and obviously a lot can change over time, is that we'll start with a drivered system, and then transition a certain percentage, which may be high or low. We just have to see what's kind of the status, especially for the longer trips, by the way, like to the airport, which is 9 miles, um, to have kind of a mix of them. But the business model closes with both. This is a thing where the Bourne company is dependent on autonomy, but full self drive is amazing. Robotaxis are amazing, and drivers are amazing. So, like I said, healthy mix sounds correct.
I'm reading here too. Some people are questioning and wanting your explanation. Why not a rail system? What is your opposition to saying that this is a more efficient system?
Yeah, trains are great, especially for a small number of stations where a lot like to stadiums and airports where everyone is going to there at the exact same time with not a lot of stops in between. It just depends on what people want. Um, if we did a rail system, the same one, just the transit time would be very long. If we did 20 stops, it's probably an hour. It's just a different system. The other things is just the cost of rail systems. It's very high. Again, I'm not a rail expert, so I'm not going to start going system by system. But I would
Sure.
invite people to look at the cost per mile of light rail and of subway, and it's just very high. Not only to build but to operate. So this one has. Well, I mean, this one is free. It's zero taxpayer dollars. I will say the Boring Company as a company, if anyone is ever interested in us building a rail tunnel for them, actually, one interesting factoid is that the deep versions of the London Tube are actually lower diameter. They're 11 foot 8 inches. We're just over 12 feet.
Huh.
The shallower ones are higher. They're about 18 feet in diameter. The Boring Company will happily build a rail tunnel or bus tunnel or public transit tunnel for anyone who's interested. But no problem. 18-foot machines are a pretty standard diameter. But right now we don't have any customers for that. If at some point someone would like us to do that, we would happily do that, including in Nashville. But right now we believe the correct public transportation system, especially for this use case, is Loop. Hence the focus there.
Question here coming in from Colby. What are some of the operational and design challenges learned from the Las Vegas loop that will be applied now to Music City Loop?
I'll happily answer that, but Charles, Robert, or D, I feel like I'm monopolizing a little bit. So, is there something that you'd like to say, or that would be helpful?
Keep going.
Okay.
You don't want me answering questions about engineering.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Sorry, what was the question again, Alex? I apologize.
It was asking about you guys made me laugh. What was my last question that I just the design challenges learned from the Las Vegas loop that will be applied now to Music City Loop.
Yeah, I think the two biggest lessons we learned, I mean, a lot of lessons, obviously, but I think the two things, just speaking from personal experience, is the importance of community engagement upfront and continuing. I actually, doing all of this work in Nashville actually inspired us to up our games in both Las Vegas and Texas, as well. So it's actually a great lesson, and we hope to keep that going. Hence, this is the first X Space we've ever done, so that kind of shows the importance here. The second, which is going to sound obvious, but it wasn't obvious to us at the beginning, is just how extreme subsurface water is. You read articles about it, you see videos, but until you experience it, so if you go to one of our design meetings, or engineering meetings, or project meetings, water is 20% of every meeting. No one can add anything to the machine unless they address its effect on water. And even though Nashville, we don't expect it to be anything like Las Vegas, we're well aware that it could be. You're deep under there, and even though we've done dozens of borings and have access to over 200 geo borings, we have the data from over 200 borings. Something can always happen in between there where you could hit water, and so the amount of paranoia that our team has for handling water is very, very, very high. And actually, to be frank, it's one of the reasons I love where we're starting. We're starting at lot 16 by the Capitol, and we're uphill, which is
Mm.
great. going uphill, 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 uphill. So if we do hit water, at least it flows out of the tunnel. But there's many times where you have to tunnel downhill. And when that happens, if you make a mistake, you lose your machine. And so while there won't be a safety issue up top in those issues, you could lose your machine. And many a boring machine has been lost to water in the history of tunneling. So long-winded way of saying, I think the two things are really community engagement and water are the things that we've learned the most.
Someone's asking here, how is the boring company being regulated? So you build these structures. Who comes in to bless them in a sense and inspect them?
Yeah, so enormous numbers of regulators and inspections. I can talk about Las Vegas, and then I can talk about Nashville. But in Las Vegas, to build all of Vegas Loop, like all of it, will require probably about between 300 and 400 permits. And each permit is signed off by order of magnitude 5 to 10 people. So to build it, I mean, we're talking about thousands of sign-offs, thousands of reviews. And by the way, Vegas is great. Like the regulators are wonderful people and super supportive. There's a lot of permits to get, as it should be. It's an enormous project. We have almost 24-hour inspection by multiple types of inspectors. We have geotechnical inspection, structural inspection, safety inspection, environmental inspection. We even invite our local stakeholders, like the convention center, to inspect us. And then, of course, we have our internal inspectors. But there's often times where there's more inspectors on site than there are boring company employees. And this isn't a knock. This is actually a good thing. So enormous amounts of oversight on this. In Nashville, there's, I think, and apologies if I get this question, the number exactly wrong, but I believe there's approximately 45 permits that we need to start. And those are state permits, those are environmental permits, those are metro permits, enormous amounts of permits, as there should be. There's an enormous amount of reporting that we have to do. These aren't you just get the permit and you're done. There's enormous amounts of reporting requirements and compliance, as there should be. So just want to make sure there's no like misconception that this is an unregulated, uninspected project. It is exactly the opposite. And we'll also be as transparent as humanly possible. In the same way that we're putting all our environmental data and our settlement data, I don't see any reason we can't just put this on our website. And so I think what you'll see is when we start tunneling in Nashville, we'll put as much as we're allowed to put on our website. So actually the general public can see the data. I think it'd be pretty cool for everyone to see the settlement data and see that the roads are safe.
We have Councilman Russ Bradford joining us. Thank you for being here, sir. How much she's asking will each driver make? Is it based on number of trips? Is there a base salary? Will they be boring company employees or independent contractors? And will they be allowed to be union?
Yeah, so there'll be boring company employees. This is critical because the amount of safety training that a boring company or loop driver has to go through is enormous. This isn't you come and you start driving that day. You go through weeks and sometimes months of training. We abide by all of the federal laws for commercial drivers, including drug and alcohol testing. There's the state laws, and then, for example, in Nevada, we go by federal laws, NTA, which is the Nevada Transport Authority, and then all of the local, and we do the superset of all of these things. There's an enormous amount of continuing education. They have to be trained on how to handle all of the contingencies. So it's critical that the drivers are employees of the boring company, so we can make sure the training is properly done. For payment, it's always above market rate. So I can't tell you the exact number right now, but it's very important to attract fantastic people. So it'll always be above what a driver would make elsewhere. And the most important part, in my opinion, is the drivers are incentivized for safe driving. We have something we probably need a new name for it, but we call it the awesomeness score. And based on your awesomeness score, you receive bonuses and raises. And the things that contribute to the awesomeness score are 90% that you're driving safe, that you're abiding by the speed limit. We have speed limits at different sections in our tunnels. We watch everyone drive. We have cameras in the cars. And so as long as people are driving safe, they make more and more money. Yeah, right now I think in Las Vegas, I think we employ it's more than 200 drivers. So yeah, it's a pretty incredible group of people. And the same thing we'll be starting in Nashville. What I can say is that hasn't been the largest focus yet because we're pretty focused on construction. My guess is we'll start ramping that up. This is a guess, but we'll probably start ramping that up in Q3 of next year. So it sounds about right where we can start looking at that.
We have Fadi K asking, where is the deepest portion of the proposed tunnel alignment to the airport? And has the current design required adjustments to avoid existing and future utilities, or has utility conflicts not really been a significant issue so far?
Oh, it's an enormous issue. Absolutely. Besides safe tunneling, utility avoidance is one of the most important thing in all of tunneling. Yeah, that's. I mean, the amount of diligence that we do on this is incredibly high. I can go into some of it. But we do the obvious, which is the as-built. But the as-built is anyone who bets their project on the as-built is not paranoid enough. Because I have never in the history of any of the tunnels we've built seen a 100% correct as-built. But you start there. The next thing you do is enormous amounts of scans. You do GPR, and there's other types. You do an enormous amount of potholing. Potholing means you actually drill down and expose the utility. You do enormous amounts of site walks, et cetera. You meet with each individual utility and actually walk with them. Those are that's just the beginning. But one of the best thing you can generally do is just stay below them, especially in the rock. The rock is great because you really you kind of know it's there, and not a lot of people are going 90 feet down. Although in Nashville there is stuff 90 feet down. It's just less common. So the deepest we are is 90 feet. The shallowest we are is around 20. You try and be fairly shallow when you're near stations, just it makes it easier to build if they're surface, but sometimes you just end up being extremely deep. But I can't express, again, besides safety, utility avoidance is probably the thing we spend the second most amount of time. And the local utilities have been wonderful to this effect.
Okay, let's move here to speed. Several people are asking, how fast are they driving within the tunnels?
Yeah, so it depends on which tunnel section. So in Las Vegas, the first thing we built in Las Vegas were the twin tunnels at the convention center, and they were 0.8 miles twin tunnels. So it was about 1.6, 1.7 miles. And the shortest individual section was about a half a mile. So in that one, the speed limit is 40 miles an hour. Is the drive is a few minutes, like it's like 2 minutes. That's the drive. So there'd be no reason to go 100 miles an hour in a 0.5 mile long tunnel section. In Music City Loop, when you have the 9 miles going from downtown to the airport and hopefully including Broadway, for that 9 mile stretch, we'll probably average just above 60. That's where we get the 9 minutes from. For top speed that we've ever gone in the tunnel, we actually went 137 miles an hour in our Los Angeles tunnel. But one, we wouldn't do that. And two, and then two, you don't need to do that. 60 is a nice, safe, easy value to drive, and it wouldn't even be worth trying to go 90 miles an hour and cutting the minute or two. So, like I said, in kind of local small segments, you're around 40, and then in the longer ones, you're in 60. I do want to stress that the short transit times are not driven as much by speed as you would think. If you picture kind of your typical public transportation ride, there's there's four different parts. The first is how far is the station from you? And that's why we talk about large numbers of small stations. The second is once you get to the station, how long do you wait? And that's why we talk about median wait times of close to zero or zero in most cases, mean above zero, obviously. The third is the actual trip, and the trip is based on speed, but it's also based on how often you have to stop. And the numbers of times you have to stop is zero. So there's no intersections, there's no red lights, et cetera, on the main arteries. And then finally, at the other end, it's how long does it take to walk from the loop station to where you're going, and you make that the 100 feet. So if you combine those five factors, you can see that speed is obviously important, but it's not actually the driver of your total transit time.
All right, Steve, you piqued my interest. What were you doing to go 130 something miles per hour in the tunnel?
It was a pure test with a professional driver.
Okay, fair enough. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
what did you just say?
yeah,
Can we
yeah. No,
circle
that
back to
wasn't
that?
that.
Okay.
That was not a general public
Okay,
crowd.
fair enough. Okay, I can handle that now. I'm
Yeah.
going to put two questions together here because they're related. So, at Dry Rain and a bunch of numbers, what's your 5-year plan, and where would you love to see the Boring Company? And then Metaphysics 88 is asking, are you envisioning this to essentially be a central nervous system of transportation, if you will, that potentially could connect throughout the country?
We would love to. So the um the Boring Company has three missions. It's solve traffic, it's beautify cities, and when I say beautify cities, most cities, I mean, cars are wonderful. There's a reason that we many people own them and want them, and then obviously they're so highly demanded that you get traffic. If you can, but about between 30 and 70% of cities are devoted to cars. parking lots and streets and all that stuff. And if you can put all of that underground and take back your city, the surface, that's amazing. So beautify city is kind of the second goal, and the third, which is just on a personal note, my personal favorite is 30-minute transportation between any 2 points in the country, like that, and that's Hyperloop. And the challenge with Hyperloop, which is just fast cars going in a low pressure tube, the difficulty of Hyperloop is not Hyperloop. It's the tunnel. It's where do you put this vehicle? And so the faster our machines get, it would not be reasonable for the Boring Company to say we would like to build a tunnel from Nashville to Los Angeles. That would be beyond unreasonable because our machine is not fast enough. That would take a century. I guess we could pump out 1,000 machines and launch them all, but that's not reasonable. But what is reasonable based on our current speeds is to do, again, the two largest tunneling projects in America for transportation, Vegas Loop and Music City Loop, within a city. And then the hope and dream is one, that the city likes us and uses it and wants us to build more. And while that's happening, our machine is getting faster and faster, such that we can say, okay, great, we have a loop in Nashville. Now let's build a loop in Knoxville. And by the way, we haven't talked with Knoxville. That's a reasonably close major city, and we built a Knoxville loop, and then we connect them with a short Hyperloop. And now you're 10, 15 minutes between anywhere in Nashville and anywhere in Knoxville. These are just personal hopes. Zero conversations have occurred between of what I just said.
Hmm.
But if you could just hope, like what I want to happen, that is what I would like to happen. And I also hope that happens in Nashville. We talked about the airport line. We talked about a hopeful Broadway line. I hope the general public loves this and wants us to build more. And it's a system that you can expand without affecting the existing system. And again, zero taxpayer dollars.
I do want to circle back on talking about limestone. I see Senator Campbell has joined us. B. Smith is also asking. Would like you to clarify your comment about the rock helping prevent sinkholes. How is that true? If limestone is susceptible to sinkholes, can you explain the engineering feat behind that?
Yeah, and rock tunnels are very common. Actually, Nashville already has several rock tunnels. We've toured them. The first thing we did actually when we got, I mean, this is early, was we said, can we please see your tunnels? And Metro, it was great and took us through the tunnels. So we have personally walked several tunnels already in Nashville and looked at the engineering and looked at how they were built. So that's the first thing. This is not a first for Nashville. Tunneling has been happening for years there. If you go to Geo, the first thing you do is enormous amounts of diligence. What you'll see in general, and this is not every spot in Nashville, but it's general. The first few feet will be superficial fill. Then you'll hit some clays, and then you'll hit limestone. And then the deeper you go, in general, your RQD or your rock quality designation gets better and better. And you really want to be above 90%. That's when you're the most competent rock and super stable. Um, so Boring Company themselves we've already completed I think it's either 17 or 18 core sample borings. We've done 7 MASW surveys. That's a multi-channel analysis of surface waves. It's a non-destructive or non-impactful way to get more geodata. We've also reviewed 170 plus historical borings. Nashville had an enormous amount of historical data where we're looking to tunnel, and we're still doing more. And you just keep going and going and going. But even then, you can't hit everywhere, right? It'd be impossible to do a boring every foot, for example. So you create geotechnical reports and profiles. Once you have all your geo, you create your final alignment. You put yourself in the most competent possible rock, and when you're in the competent rock, that's where you get pretty much. And by the way, Nashville rock. I mean, it's bad for tunneling, but great for settlements. It's extremely hard in the places where the RQD is above 90%. You typically have rock between 10,000 and 20,000 psi. Like this is like crazy hard rock. I mean, a lot of the rock projects in the world are 5 and 6,000 psi. The machine moves a lot faster through that because it's softer. In Vegas, we hit something called caliche. It's typically between 6 and 12,000 psi that we go through. But Nashville is actually the hardest, 10 and 20,000 for the depths that we're at. And so um, settlement risk is incredibly low at our depth and at those PSI levels. We still do all the settlement monitoring like we discussed earlier. Um, the downside is, to be honest, to our machines, because what it's going to mean is we're going to burn through our cutter head tools at a much higher rate than if it was softer. And just what that kind of means is that our cutter head in front has 30 discs that are what actually cuts the rock. And because the rock is so hard, there will be more wear in them, which just means we have to change them more often. It just means it's more expensive. But if you ignore that, again, I think I mentioned at the beginning, the thing that made us do Nashville was everyone was welcoming, it was useful, and it was technically feasible to build. And while we were surprised at how hard the rock actually was, that actually made it more technically feasible to build, because it's actually an easier problem to solve.
At Shamara, I think is probably how I should pronounce that. How will this help me as an everyday Tennessean traveling in and around the Metro Nashville area? Will it be accessible to all citizens or only a select few?
I apologize. You broke up for me for the like 5 seconds there. Could you say it one more time?
Absolutely. How will this help me as an everyday Tennessean traveling in and around the Metro Nashville area? Will it be accessible to all citizens or only a select few?
Sure. I'd love for Charles, Robert, and Dee to help on the first one, but the answer is absolutely yes. This is a general public transportation system. There's no one excluded from this system. I can't tell you the exact fares today, but I can give you sample fares. I can tell you exactly what we charge in Las Vegas right now, which I can't imagine it will be much different. Right now, a single ride in Las Vegas is around $4. A round trip is around $7, and a day pass for unlimited travel is around $12 or $13. Um, I it won't be more than a few percentage points off of that. And our fares are on our website, so you can always just look at them. But I can't imagine why we would charge much more than that.
Mhm.
The goal is for this to be extremely accessible and extremely affordable. If we came out with $40 fares, I mean, one, that would be silly, and two, nobody would like us. Um, so it's very important that this is extremely affordable, and that everyone who uses it believes good value. I mean, the $12 deal in a day pass. I mean, I think the average rides on the day pass is like 7 or 8, so it ends up being around $1.50 a ride for those that do that. And then Charles, Robert, or Dee, would you like to talk about the other part?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say, I mean, from a Nashville Yards perspective, right, we would anticipate not just those people staying in the hotel using the Music City Loop, but also tenants, residents, those coming to a concert, those coming to the movies, those coming to the park. And so we would anticipate not just visitors to the city, but also Nashvillians, the workforce that supports this campus in and around the campus. So we would envision the accessibility of this being open to everyone.
Go
Yeah, I
ahead, Dee.
concur. I think it just complements again how we can individualize how we want to move around our community. And I think the accessibility part is an important piece for hospitality, whether it be the workforce that supports the industry or the guests that are inbound coming in. And obviously, those residents who I think if there was one going to Green Hills, I would personally use it just because we all know how congested that route can get, in addition to obviously the airport to downtown. But it's yeah, I concur with what Charles has said thus far with all patrons sort of utilizing the service.
Hmm. Steve, will Cybertrucks be allowed in the tunnel? Someone is asking.
Yeah, we actually, I think in Vegas, right now we're running around 130, 140 cars, and I think we have 6 Cybertrucks going right now. They won't be the majority of them, but they'll certainly be like, a 5% type number in the system.
And okay, let's see here. What would happen to the tunnels if the boring company makes a decision to no longer operate the system?
That would be a very surprising outcome if we're going to obviously invest in all the
Hmm.
infrastructure to stop. But if one creates that scenario, there would be two possibilities. The first is part of our permit and leases with the state and with all the regulators. We have to have a decommissioning plan, which is we have to make sure that there is money available to decommission the entire system, which involves typically various structural supports, various seals, et cetera. So if that ever happened, and the government decided they wanted to shut down the entire system, we would execute on that decommissioning plan. That would be a very that would be an odd decision to make, though, because the tunnels are an asset. For example, you can run utilities through tunnels. You can do many things through tunnels, and so if we suddenly just disappeared, which again I can't imagine how that happens, but if that's what happened, I would think they would use that as an asset, because it's basically installing incredibly high value infrastructure in Nashville.
This is a fun question from World Traveler. And I think as I'm looking through, we're seeing some of the same questions. So we'll probably start wrapping here. But Do you ever find pockets of gold? Anything
um,
good as you've bored through the Earth's surface here?
no, we haven't. I guess based on a comment before, if we find it, we'll donate it. But no, we've never found gold.
And what can I share with people? Where can they get more information from you as we start to wrap up this conversation? Is there an FAQ page? Do you plan on doing more of these potentially in the future? What can we expect next?
Yeah, we have a website devoted to Music City Loop on the Boring Company website. Go to the projects page. You can click on it. We have an FAQ up there that we update every 1 or 2 weeks based on mostly questions that we see on X. And then you can always email us at nashville@boringcompany.com. We try to respond to all of them, but it's a lot of emails. We release a blog post every 2 months, so the next one is coming out on December 1st. And to be very frank, after this, I'm actually just going to go onto X and look at the comments. And if they're Steve's an idiot. Tell him never to do a space again. then we won't do it. Or if like this was helpful, you should do more. Then we'll do more.
Okay, great. You've got a lot of people writing in, so I'm glad that you're going to go back. I was attempting to touch as on many as I could. So thank you all for participating. It was wonderful to see this. And thank you to the panelists and to Steve for engaging us and allowing us to have this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you for joining us.